Welcome everyone. This is our third episode of the BEE Chamber podcast. We're super excited to be back. And I hope that everyone is doing well. I hope it's been a great sort of week that you're having, great sort of month that you're having. I hope that everybody's being really productive in your workspaces. And we're just super excited to be back to film our third episode of the BEE Chamber podcast. And I'm joined by one of our colleagues, Keba. Keba will introduce himself and his role at the BEE Chamber. Keba, welcome, and it's such a great pleasure to have you here.
Hi Emil and hi everybody, and thank you very much for having me. Yes, as you rightly said, my name is Keba Matlango. I'm the transformation specialist and the ESD lead at the BEE Chamber.
Awesome. So today's topic that we're going to be talking about is something that myself and Keba believe in very passionately, the power of enterprise and supply development that holds quite a lot of different facets attached to it. We've got concepts that are speaking to enterprise development, we've got concepts that are speaking to supply development, as well as preferential procurement. So we're going to be unpacking this topic today, talking about a few aspects that we want our viewers to be aware of and just to be more informed in respect of what happens under this area. And Kevin, I want to start off by just asking you a question regarding this concept. What does it actually entail? When we talk about enterprise and supply development, what does it mean to businesses as well as the South African economy?
I think what is important to understand that enterprise and supply development from a BEE context is basically aimed at stimulating economic growth and basically creating jobs. Those are the two key aspects of enterprise and supply development. And if you look at the objectives of enterprise and supply development, it talks about how do you create that operational and financial independence for the beneficiaries of enterprise and supply development. So it starts from there. So when you look at it, where it starts from, it starts talking about the impact that can have to the broader society from an inclusivity point of view. That now you're starting having to basically empower companies so that they can be included in different company supply chain. So that's where we're going. And if that happens, then supply chains are diversified and they become much more inclusive.
No, definitely, and I mean, that's what it's all about, to make sure that there's diversification, there's inclusivity, there's sustainability. But just from your experience, how effective are strategies out there when it relates to ESD? We've had a lot of conversations on this topic, and we also find that some strategies within organizations are lacking. How effective do you think that they are in terms of adding value to our economy?
At this point in time, I'll frankly say it is not effective. At this point in time. And there's a couple of reasons why it's not effective. You will know that part of the Sundown report that we talked about is enterprise and supply development. There's about 6 billion available for developing enterprises. But the problem is that small and medium enterprises are basically failing at the rate of over 70% in the first 2 years. That tells you that it is not effective. And I think what becomes a challenge is basically 3 key areas that are big diversity challenges. Number one is what we call the cash flow problem. That the way the companies, particularly large corporates, are structured, they will have 30, 60, 90-day payment terms. Now, by doing that, it means that a small enterprise that do not have access to capital, access to finance, they will have to find money somewhere to basically execute on their obligation for the large corporates, and they're not going to be paid probably into 60 to 90 days. And in that period, they have overheads. They basically have to have input towards delivery. Now, this is what I refer to sometimes as, I call it pseudo financing or pseudo trade finance for large corporates. So they're using SMEs as basically their trade finance, because by the time they pay, they will already be long received the benefit of what they have. So they don't have to find money, but the small company has to find money. And this is one of the biggest problems in terms of why the small companies they fail in the first 2 years. Maybe that becomes a problem. When you compound over a period of time, then they get choked and then they cannot afford to last for long. So that's the first problem that you find out why they die. The second problem that I picked up is basically what I call what I refer to as red tape. Small companies have the same legislative compliance as large companies. So the bureaucracy in the system chokes the small companies, because now they're expected to, if let's say for instance a small company wants to apply for financing, what they will do, they will basically have to go through a lot of paperwork and a lot of testing, a lot of assessments, and this basically can take longer, probably in general, normally it's about 4 months minimum. Now, what this does basically, because of that red tape from legislative compliance, from financing to basically complying with a lot of other things, that basically takes away more of their time and their resources basically from delivering on that delivery. Now, if you compare, if a large corporate wants financing, they pick up a phone, call basically their banker, and they get the financing they need. For a small company, that's not the case. That's the second problem. The third problem, I call it knowing your customer. And this is being I said, this is now, it's not an external factor from a small company, it's an internal factor from a small company. Now, know your customer. Most small companies do not necessarily understand what the ultimate problem is that they're solving. More often than not, they will say you something like, "I'm trying to keep your offices clean." It's a clean company. The problem about that is that they don't realize that in keeping your company clean, they're not actually delivering the cleanliness part. They're delivering for you as a large corporation, a good working environment for employees. That's what they deliver. They deliver the hygiene place to work. They deliver in compliance in terms of different occupational health and safety. So what they see them delivering, they see themselves delivering a clean environment. They don't realize that delivering the bigger things that makes your company work. Because if the environment is not really conducive for your people, they will not be productive. So they add to your productivity intake. And again, by understanding how whatever product or service they give you, how you impact in a business long term or in a bigger scope, then you can position it differently. So and sometimes that's why they do it from the pricing, from how they basically service you, the time that they service you. They all those things should be geared towards supporting your productivity. And most of them don't understand that. And not understanding that they become an inconvenience to some other business, and that's why sometimes they fail. So these three key aspects are the one that I basically personally that I picked up as the key problem to making survival small business.
No, definitely. I think that what you shared already now is practical. It's real life situations that the small businesses are facing, and I think that when companies out there are adopting and developing enterprise and supply development strategies, they need to consider these areas. And one of the conversations that we've had around enterprise and supply development is the concept of needs analysis. And you stress upon this all the time when we have conversations or if we're in our webinars. You stress upon the point of having a needs or conducting a needs analysis for beneficiaries. Why is that so important? Why do you always stress upon this?
Look, sometimes we sometimes think we know what we sometimes don't know. And until such time, we basically unpack a couple of things and realize we didn't know as much as we thought we know. Now, this is basically the same concept as need analysis. At face value, you will think you understand what the problems are. But when you go one level down or one layer down, then you start realizing the problems are slightly bigger, or they're not as what you thought they are. For arguments, you can say the problem of the company is cash flow, but you remember that when you do a needs analysis, you realize the issue is not the cash flow issue. It's actually how the company is managed. Was number one. Or else it's basically the how employees are managing the company. And then basically how creditors or how debtors are managed. So when you do a needs analysis, you slightly go deeper, and the needs analysis that I always say people should do not do the quick desktop needs analysis. The preferred needs analysis that I recommend is that go to the company, walk through their processes, internal processes, and understand what do they do. It's not a short second type of thing. You need to go in there and understand their business model, understand what makes it work, what are the performance objectives in terms of the product and services that they offer. Do they want to be flexible? Do they want to be adaptable? Do they want to be quality? Do they want cost? Because based on the performance objective, and these performance objectives are determined by their clients, not by them. And based on those, then you are able to say, is your company structured such that it will meet that? And then only you can start to get their marketing, their sales, and their finances, and the operations. And based on that, you are able to say, all right, these are where the gaps are. If for argument's sake, we get that internet, we realize that the entrepreneurs or the owner of the business, basically, they're not the goods, they are not strong in finance or in accounting. And then they spend pretty much, because they're not good, they spend probably 4 hours longer than a normal person. So that means they waste more time on it that they could be using that time for productivity. But if you take an accountant or a bookkeeper who can come and do that, they can spend an hour. Now the idea is that then certain corporates will expect this guy who is basically an operations guy to be an accountant. He cannot be an accountant. He should be obsessed with delivering value to the ultimate client. And then sometimes expect him to be an accountant. He cannot be. That's not who he is. Then we need to find, in terms of they need to be now providing him accounting support. And that basically becomes his problem, and that becomes his primary need. That when it's resolved, you are able now to basically close up all the loops, and he can be productive and can deliver a service or product to that client effectively. And that's why internet is so important, because you are able to pinpoint where the challenge is and then how to basically focus on the challenge in order to ensure that the business goes on.
Yeah. Now, of course, and I mean, I totally agree with that concept, and also that same sort of process that needs to be followed. And I feel like, when you start to develop your enterprise and supply development strategy, it needs to start with that. It needs to start with a needs analysis rather than saying we want to give this to this beneficiary or give this to that beneficiary. And we sometimes find that that is usually the starting point for many companies, to say that they've got a machine or they've got a truck, who can we give this to? But they don't ask the question, does the beneficiary business need this truck or need this machine? So I think it's really important to make sure that when you embark on your journey of an enterprise development supply development strategy, that you start with that needs analysis, and also you make sure it's sustainable. And I mean, this is something that we also discussed before, is you don't want to implement initiatives for the sake of implementation. And sometimes we see that happening with organizations, that because they are governed by BEE legislation, it's a framework, there's points, there's calculations, there's targets that need to be met. You find yourself in an organization just contributing to initiatives for the sake of contribution. Now, how have you seen that change over the years, or is it still prevalent? Is it still there?
It is still prevalent, and the reason it's prevalent is because BEE, in terms of its design, we expecting BEE professionals or company professionals that are basically focused not on finance or HR or procurement. We expect them to be enterprise and supply development specialists, and they are not. They are not. They don't understand. So what they will do, they will do the first thing that comes to their mind, because what the objective is that they have to do something to get the points. So they'll do whatever they can to get the points. It has nothing to do with understanding that what they have to do is bigger than the points. It's more about how do you make sure that we can the supply chain and sustainable businesses, because this business that sustainable will supply us as a better entity with a better service. So it has become the first challenge, like I said, is the issue of having people that are not really skilled and specialized in that aspect to wanting them to deliver them. It's quite clear they are not. It's quite technical and requires some kind of understanding of business for you to help support your business. If you don't have the skill, you don't want to be and unfortunately, that's what we do. We expect people to do those things that are not stupid. You can't expect a person who's a clerk to do.
Yeah.
But then in BE, you expect someone who's in charge to be enterprise development, which does not make sense, because enterprise development is a very highly technical skill, and because you need to understand different business models. Because if you understand the different business models, you can apply the same rule for different tasks, and unfortunately, that's what.
Yeah, that blended approach is one of the approaches that I just despise, especially if you're trying to, fit something like a board or a square. It just doesn't fit. You can't have this blanket approach. You need to obviously customize. You need to make sure that it is conducive for that actual beneficiary business. And that's really important to understand. And I think at the same time, as a the BE Chamber, we always talk about being more transformational. Making sure that whatever you do has impact and ROI, not only for beneficiaries but also for the business. So you need to make sure it makes sense at the end of the day. And unfortunately, at times I feel like some of the decisions that organizations are making starts to ask the question: how are you as an organization or leadership or individuals in an organization making these decisions that don't make sense? How are you making these decisions that are actually putting your business at risk, because now you are finding yourself just making decisions for the sake of compliance? And it leads to no sustainability, and it leads to no benefit for the beneficiaries. And I think from my perspective, I always think about education. We just need to continuously educate as far as possible to then well-inform the individuals that are working in these spaces. You mentioned the concept of skill set, and again, you're right. HR can't do engineering work. It doesn't connect. Very, very unique skills sets that is needed, and also understanding about legislation and business. So it's really, really interesting to see, and hopefully some of our viewers are really understanding those concepts, that we need to be more sustainable, we need to be more transformational, but also impactful on beneficiaries and the business. Now, Keba, another topic that actually was recently announced, or a legislative document that recently came out on the 23rd of July 2024, is the Public Procurement Act. Now, we've been waiting for this document for quite some time. Our previous Public Procurement Act was published in 2005. We're now sitting in 2024, almost 20 years later, and now we see a change in the act. What are your thoughts on the new act? What are you thinking it's going to be doing for our country? How was it written? Was it well written? Is it understandable? Are you excited about the document?
Look, first, I'm excited about it. It's a breath of fresh air. Look, from the intention of the act, it's great. Obviously, the problem is what I always say, the proof is in the pudding. Is when it comes to implementation, that basically will be the challenge. And what I picked up in terms of the reading of the act, the way it's written is slightly complex. And my worry when I was reading it, because I had to go through about 4 to 5 times to really get it right.
Yes.
And my worry is that if I had to go through that about 5 times, and I've been in the procurement space for so many years, what about someone who sits in a municipality in Gauteng, or in a municipality in Hermanus, or in the Northern Cape, in Pakistan, or whatever, or in Tusing, in Northwest? How will those municipal managers or the procurement heads be able to decipher this document and be able to implement it on a day-to-day basis? Now, that becomes the tricky part. But from an intent point of view, it's a well written, well thought out, and it's trying to. I'm trying to unpack the document and so that you understand what I mean when I say the written and the intent. The challenge in the country in terms of procurement is that if there's been a lot of reports written by Treasury, number one, in terms of how many municipalities are struggling in terms of procurement and in terms of administration, but the major focus is probably procurement.
Yes.
Not having proper processes followed. That becomes the core issue. The whole thing of excessive cost in terms of procurement in state house, municipalities, government departments, and then the issue of inclusivity in procurement. Now, inclusivity in procurement means that there was one corner about a year ago where we talked about why should women not have at least government, which is the stipulator of process that growth. Basically, government not procuring 40% from women-owned businesses. And the question is, with the current legislation at the time, we could not do the thing. And that's why there was still the problem of gender inclusivity in terms of procurement from government. So you have those challenges. But because of some of these things like cost, issues of corruption, issues of undue influence, issues of using government procurement for transformation and using government procurement to meet the national development plan objectives. So these things were not there. There was basically a horror fragmented legislative framework. Now, what this basically act does, it brings all of them together. And in bringing them together, it's starting to say now, in terms of when state procures, then there will be checks and balances. Now, then it introduces what we call the head of public procurement office. Now there will be a public procurement office, and there will be the same individuals that we call provincial treasurers, who will ensure basically that the seamless flow of information, of legislation, of compliance, basically from national to provincial and local. So that basically creates a good framework for that to happen.
Yeah.
But now in dealing with things like corruption, then the whole transparency that it does, it brings a lot of transparency that how should the tenders be written, how should be adjudicated, how should they basically be the people involved, that government employees or state-owned entities employees cannot basically bid for those things. Now what it does, it takes away that problem where you have me as a government employee bidding for the same tender that is issued within the same department I'm in. And obviously because chances are I'll get it because number one, I can have access to other people's pricing and all those other things. And then if I have those pricing and the how it's written, what is required to respond, I can take that information and do something my own way. But also if I do that, it means I'm stopping doing what I'm doing, which I'm paid for to be a government employee, and start now trying to be a supplier to government. Because I don't use the government time to try and supply them, which is really a double dipping system. Now, it's starting to deal with this issue, by making sure that we don't have government employees basically having to be suppliers of government while they're employed. That's the one thing. The second part that it does, it looks at how do you protect the integrity of the process, and then and in doing that, bringing in things like a system, either the introduction of an ICT-based system, and processes that basically can be digitalized to start basically managing procurement. So it starts doing that. It brings that whole aspect, and it also brings in the biggest challenge of the professional procurement regulations 2017 and 2022. Those challenges, because the first one was talking about using BE as a tool for calculating the 80-20 or the 90-10 to basically awarding of 10 that just scoring of that. And now, then that's the first thing that it does. The second part is basically using what we call specific goals as per the basic constitutional requirements. Now, in the first one in 2017, we were using BE as a pseudo for specific goals in line with the constitution, which the court found that it means that it was outside its powers. But in the 2022, he was only now forgetting about BE and saying we're going to use only specific goals. What that did, it basically rendered BE not necessary. Because then it means when you apply for government tender, bidding for government tender, I don't need the base of BE because it's not going to be used for calculation in terms of education. So now what it was starting to become is like, why do I have to now do it anymore? Now what this one does, it brings both of them together. Now you're going to use it to use. But on top of that, it also brings in an element of how do you use sustainable development, and the issue of green purchasing and ensuring that basically that is factored into the mix. So now it creates a platform to say like how do you align international standards basically to ensure that basically the purchase we factor in the issue of the sustainability and environmental stewardship. So those are some of the aspects. But then the last thing that it does, it brings in the issue of the tribunal. To say if someone feels that there's something wrong, that there's someone that can go to complain, and if people have basically done certain offenses, then these people basically can be found guilty. And the Act basically prescribes that for certain offenses, what will be the maximum imprisonment term or fines or recovery of assets, recovery of loss. So now what it does, it brings in everything else together, so it becomes basically much more transparent, much more open, much more inclusive, and then from there also will create a framework to ensure that people should not abuse the system.
And accountability.
and that basically for me, that's what it does. So I try to unpack everything out in at a go, but I know and it's bigger than that. It's much bigger than that. But these are the highlights of the current
So I mean, it's really a significant milestone for our country. I mean, this is one of the state is the biggest procurer in our entire country in terms of goods and services. And there's a very close link between professional procurement, enterprise development, supply development, and I always see it as the ecosystem. You always look at how we can develop standalone businesses and then start procuring from them and develop them further once they are suppliers. And that's also really important for our viewers to also understand that you need to create with your initiatives and your strategies and your policies and procedures that you need to look at how best can you create an ecosystem of sustainability between these three different sub-elements. And once you can get that correct, it's going to obviously be impactful for beneficiaries as well for the business. I mean, if you ask a business now, do you want a strong supply of goods and services? Everybody's going to putting their hands up because that's something that you need as a business in order for your business to be sustainable. So I just feel at times that there are decisions made in organizations that are not based on sustainability, rather just compliance. So Kevin, thank you for that insight in terms of the Public Procurement Act. We're looking forward to the implementation. I believe that there still will be regulations, notices, there'll be a lot more guidance coming out, and hoping that all the state public entities can have kind of a seamless sort of process and move into the implementation phase, because that's where the pudding is going to actually lie in terms of being the proof. So it's going to be exciting to see. So Kevin, I really appreciate the time that you've taken out today to discuss this topic, enterprise and supply development, giving some insights in respect of Procurement Act and also just your general knowledge based on your experience. We definitely appreciate those insights. Last question, any other comments or any piece of advice that you would like to give those enterprise and supply development managers or third-party facilitators, something personal that you want to share with them in this space? Any advice that you want to provide to them?
Yes, I think what is important is to understand that if you don't understand the framework that you do, the first thing to do is that seek someone else who can do it, who is well experienced, who understands how the system goes, and you understand small business challenges. Because not everybody does understand small business challenges. But again, you have to have a macro view of why the small business. Because if you look at small business is an integral part of meeting the objectives of the national development. And now you have to understand the whole, like I said, ecosystem. In terms of the whole economic framework and how it becomes more inclusive, and how it becomes also trying to be a driver of a job on social inclusion, and also basically how to as a person, as a manager in a company, how to start taking it much more seriously. Because we as executives, it becomes more and more complex to run businesses because there's so many moving parts at the same time. But as I said, when you're not sure, there's nothing wrong in saying, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you just find someone to help us? It should not only happen in terms of you and the product and service, but it should happen in terms of compliance, in terms of others that you may not necessarily know, however well best. There will be people that and if you struggle a bit further, then come to the D chamber. We are able to help you to say, how do we basically help the process. And remember, we're not only doing this in the context of being compliance. We do this within the context of the whole business and understanding the macro view of the country and where you place your business and ensure that you minimize your supply risk and you basically try and optimize your compliance and from a transformational approach point of view. And obviously trying to ensure that you become competitive as a business and productive and ensure that compliance and sustainability doesn't hamper your business. So we're looking at from that overall. So that's what we do with us.
Sure, okay, well that's some really powerful advice. I know all of your experience has just come out in those couple of sentences. I know you're well versed in the space and we're always looking forward to seeing what you do, the impact that you have, especially with the programs that we manage at the BE Chamber on behalf of our members. It's really exciting to see what you've been doing in terms of your workspace. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today, being our guest, sharing some good knowledge on the topic of enterprise and supply development. We really do appreciate that. And from my side, we hope that you found this episode of our podcast being quite informative. We hope that you've had some takeaways or some good learnings from this podcast. And please feel free to engage with the BEE Chamber if you need any support, or guidance, or assistance. And look out for our next episode of our podcast. We will be launching our episode 4 very soon. And goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.